Hello, Mitchell Mustangs. Welcome back to our very last video this Thursday, May 21st. Thank you so much for tuning in as we finish this awesome book, Holes. Thank you for everything that you have done in this online classroom platform. So what I'd love to do is finish the book. Let's continue to read. Sounds good? Glasses are a little fogged. The humidity in Texas. Reminds me of why Louis Sachar said he wrote this book, the setting. Here we go. Chapter 48. They walked back to camp. The tall man was the Texas Attorney General, the chief law enforcement officer for the entire state. Stanley's lawyer was named Ms. Marengo. Stanley held the suitcase. He was so tired he couldn't think straight. He felt as if he was walking in a dream, not quite able to comprehend what was going on all around him. They stopped in front of the camp office. Mr. Sir went inside to get Stanley's belongings. The Attorney General told Mr. Pendanski to get the boys something to drink and eat. The warden seemed as dazed as Stanley. "You can't even read," she said to Zero. Zero said nothing. Ms. Marengo put a hand on Stanley's shoulder and told him to hang in there. He would be seeing his parents soon. She was shorter than Stanley, but somehow gave the appearance of being tall. Mr. Pendanski returned with 2 cartons of orange juice and 2 bagels. Stanley drank the juice but didn't feel like eating anything. "Wait!" the warden exclaimed. "I didn't say they stole the suitcase. It's his suitcase, obviously, but he put my things from my cabin inside of it." "That isn't what you said earlier," said Ms. Marengo. "What's in the suitcase?" the warden asked Stanley. "Tell us what's in it, then we'll open it and see." Stanley didn't know what to do. "Stanley, as your lawyer, I advise you not to open your suitcase," said Ms. Marengo. "He has to open it," said the warden. "I have the right to check the personal property of any of the detainees. How do I know there aren't drugs or weapons in there? He stole a car too. I've got witnesses." She was nearly hysterical. "He is no longer under your jurisdiction," said Stanley's lawyer. "He has not been officially released," said the warden. "Open the suitcase, Stanley." "Do not open it," said Stanley's lawyer. Stanley did nothing. Mr. Sir returned from the office with Stanley's backpack and clothes. The Attorney General handed Ms. Marengo a sheet of paper. "You're free to go," he said to Stanley. "I know you're anxious to get out of here, so you can just keep the orange suit as a souvenir, or burn it, whatever you want. Good luck, Stanley." He reached out his hand to shake, but Ms. Marengo hurried Stanley away. "Come on, Stanley," she said. "We have a lot to talk about." Stanley stopped and turned to look at Zero. He couldn't just leave him here. Zero gave him thumbs up. "I can't leave Hector," Stanley said. "I suggest we go," said his lawyer in a sense of urgency in her voice. "I'll be okay," said Zero. His eyes shifted toward Mr. Pendanski on one side of him, then to the warden and Mr. Sir on the other. "There's nothing I can do for your friend," said Ms. Marengo. "You are released pursuant to an order from the judge." "They'll kill him," said Stanley. "Your friend is not in danger," said the Attorney General. "There's going to be an investigation into everything that's happened here. For the present, I am taking charge of this camp." "Come on, Stanley," said his lawyer. "Your parents are waiting." Stanley stayed where he was. His lawyer sighed. "May I have a look at Hector's file?" she asked. "Certainly," said the Attorney General. "Ms. Walker, go get Hector's file." She looked at him blankly. Well, the warden turned to Mr. Pendanski. Bring me Hector Zeroni's file. He stared at her. Get it, she ordered. Mr. Pendanski went into the office. He returned a few minutes later and announced the file was apparently misplaced. The Attorney General was outraged. What kind of camp are you running here, Ms. Walker? The warden said nothing. She stared at the suitcase. The Attorney General assured Stanley's lawyer that he would get the records. Excuse me while I call my office. He turned back to the warden. I assume the phone works. He walked into the camp office, slamming the door behind him. A little while later, he reappeared and told the warden he wanted to talk to her. She cursed, then went inside. Stanley gave 0 thumbs up. Caveman, is that you? He turned to see Armpit and Squid coming out of the rec room. Squid shouted back into the rec room. Caveman and Zero are out here. Soon, all the boys from Group D had gathered around him and Zero. Good to see you, man, Armpit said, shaking his hand. We thought you were buzzard food. Stanley is being released today, said Mr. Pendanski. Way to go, said Magnet, hitting him on the shoulder. And you didn't even have to step on a rattlesnake, said Squid. Even Zigzag shook Stanley's hand. Sorry about, It's cool, said Stanley. We had to lift the truck clear out of the hole, Zigzag told him. It took everyone in C, D, and E. We just picked it right up. It was really cool, said Twitch. X-Ray was the only one who didn't come over. Stanley saw him hang back behind the others a moment, then return to the rec room. Guess what? Said Magnet, glancing at Mr. Pendanski. Mom says we don't have to dig any more holes. That's great, Stanley said. Will you do me a favor? Asked Squid. I guess, Stanley agreed, somewhat hesitantly. I want to... He turned to Miss Marengo. Hey, lady, you have a pen and a paper I can borrow? She gave it to him, and Squid wrote down a phone number which he gave to Stanley. Call my mom for me, okay? Tell her I said I was sorry. Tell her Alan said he was sorry. Stanley promised he would. Now, you be careful out in the real world, said Armpit. Not everybody is as nice as us. Stanley smiled. The boys departed. When the warden came out of the office, the Attorney General was right behind her. My office is having some difficulty locating Hector Zeroni's records, the Attorney General said. So you have no claim or authority over him, asked Ms. Marengo. I didn't say that. He's in the computer. We just can't access his records. It's like they've fallen through a hole in cyberspace. A hole in cyberspace? Repeated Ms. Marengo. How interesting. When is his release date? I don't know. How long has he been here? Like I said, we can't. So what are you planning to do with him? Keep him confined indefinitely without justification while you go crawling through black holes in cyberspace? The Attorney General stared at her. He was obviously incarcerated for a reason. Oh, and what reason was that? The Attorney General said nothing. Stanley's lawyer took hold of Zero's hand. Come on, Hector, you're coming with us. I love it. Chapter 49. There never used to be yellow-spotted lizards in the town of Green Lake. They didn't come to the area until after the lake dried up. But the townsfolk had heard about the red-eyed monsters living in the desert hills. One afternoon, Sam, the onion man, and his donkey, Mary Lou, were returning to his boat, which was anchored just a little offshore. It was late in November, and the peach trees had lost most of their leaves. Sam, someone called out. He turned around to see 3 men running after him, waving their hats. He waited. Afternoon, Walter, Bo, Jesse, he greeted them as they walked up, catching their breath. Glad we caught you, said Bo. We're going rattlesnake hunting this morning. We want to get some of your lizard juice, said Walter. I ain't a scared of no rattlesnakes, said Jessie, but I don't want to come across one of those red-eyed monsters. I seen one once, and that was enough. I knew about the red eyes, of course. I hadn't heard about the big black teeth. It's the white tongues that get me, said Bo. Sam gave each man 2 bottles of pure onion juice. He told them to drink 1 bottle before going to bed that night, then a half a bottle in the morning, and then a half a bottle around lunchtime. You sure this stuff works? Asked Walter. I tell you what, said Sam. If it doesn't, you can come back next week and I'll give you your money back. Walter looked around unsure, and Bo and Jessie laughed. Then Sam laughed too. Even Mary Lou let out a rare hee-haw. Just remember, Sam told the men before they left, it's very important you drink a bottle tonight. You got to get it in your bloodstream. The lizards don't like onion blood. Stanley and Zero sat in the back seat of Ms. Marengo's BMW. The suitcase lay between them. It was locked, and they decided they'd let Stanley's father try to open it in his workshop. You don't know what's in it, do you? She asked. No, said Stanley. I don't think so. The air conditioning was on, but they drove with the windows open as well because, no offense, but you boys really smell badly. Ms. Marengo explained that she was a patent attorney. I'm helping your father with the new product he's invented. He happened to mention your situation, so I did a little investigating. Clyde Livingston's sneakers were stolen sometime before 3:15. I found a young man named Derek Dunn who said that at 3:20 you were in the bathroom fishing your notebook out of the toilet. 2 girls remembered seeing you come out of the boys' restroom carrying a wet notebook. Stanley felt his ears redden, even after everything he'd been through. The memory still caused him to feel shame. So you couldn't have stolen them, said Ms. Marengo. He didn't. I did, said Zero. I stole the sneakers. The lawyer actually turned around while driving and looked at him. I didn't hear that, she said, and I advise you to make sure I don't hear it again. What did my father invent? Stanley asked. Did he find a way to recycle sneakers? No, he's still working on that, explained Ms. Marengo. But he invented a product that eliminates foot odor. Here, I've got a sample in my briefcase. I wish I had more. You 2 could bathe in it. She opened her briefcase with one hand and passed a small bottle back to Stanley. It had a fresh and somewhat spicy smell. He handed it to Zero. What's it called? Stanley asked. We haven't come up with a name yet, said Ms. Marengo. It smells familiar, said Zero. Peaches, right? Asked Ms. Marengo. That's what everyone says. A short while later, both boys fell asleep. Behind them, the sky had turned dark, and for the first time in over 100 years, a drop of rain fell into the empty lake. Part 3. Filling the Holes. Chapter 50. Stanley's mother insists that there never was a curse. She even doubts whether Stanley's great-great-grandfather really stole a pig. The reader might find it interesting, however, that Stanley's father invented his cure for foot odor the day after the great-great-grandson of Elia Yelnats carried the great-great-great-grandson of Madame Zeroni up the mountain. The Attorney General closed Camp Green Lake. Ms. Walker, who was in desperate need of money, had to sell the land, which had been in her family for generations. It was bought by a national organization dedicated to the well-being of young girls. In a few years, Camp Green Lake will become a Girl Scout camp. This is pretty much the end of the story. The reader probably still has some questions, but unfortunately, from here on in, the answers tend to be long and tedious. While Mrs. Bell, Stanley's former math teacher, might want to know the percent change in Stanley's weight, The reader probably cares more about the change in Stanley's character and self-confidence. But those changes are subtle and hard to measure. There is no simple answer. Even the contents of the suitcase turned out to be somewhat tedious. Stanley's father pried it open in his workshop, and at first everyone gasped at the sparkling jewels. Stanley thought he and Hector had become millionaires, but the jewels were of poor quality, worth no more than $20,000. Underneath the jewels was a stack of papers that had once belonged to the first Stanley Yelnats. These consisted of stock certificates, deeds of trust, and promissory notes. They were hard to read and even more difficult to understand. Ms. Marengo's law firm spent more than 2 months going through all of those papers. They turned out to be a lot more valuable than the jewels. After legal fees and taxes, Stanley and Zero each received less than $1 million, but not a lot less. It was enough for Stanley to buy his family a new home with a laboratory in the basement and for Hector to hire a team of private investigators. But it would be boring to go through all the tedious details of all the changes in their lives. Instead, the reader will be presented with one last scene, which took place almost a year and a half after Stanley and Hector left Camp Green Lake. You will have to fill in the holes yourself. There was a small party at the Yelnats' house, except for Stanley and Hector. Everyone there was an adult. All kinds of snacks and drinks were set out on the counter, including caviar, champagne, and the fixings to make ice cream sundaes. The Super Bowl was on television, but nobody was really watching. "It should be coming up at the next break," said Ms. Marengo. A timeout was called in the football game, and a commercial came on the screen. Everyone stopped talking and watched. The commercial showed a baseball game. Amid a cloud of dust, Clyde Livingston slid into his home plate as the catcher caught the ball and tried to tag him out. "Safe!" shouted the umpire as he signaled with his arms. The people at Stanley's house cheered as if the run really counted. Clyde Livingston got up and dusted the dirt off his uniform. As he made his way back to the dugout, he spoke to the camera. "Hi, I'm Clyde Livingston, but everyone around here calls me Sweet Feet." "Way to go, Sweet Feet," said another baseball player, slapping his hand. Besides being on the television screen, Clyde Livingston was also sitting on the couch next to Stanley. "But my feet weren't always sweet," the television Clyde Livingston said as he sat down on the dugout bench. "They used to smell so bad that nobody would sit near me in the dugout." "They really do stink," said the woman sitting on the couch on the other side of Clyde. She held her nose with one hand and fanned the air with the other. Clyde shushed her. "Then a teammate told me about sploosh," said the television Clyde. He pulled a can of sploosh out from under the dugout bench and held it up for everyone to see. "I just spray a little on each foot every morning, and now I really do have sweet feet. Plus, I like the tingle." "Sploosh," said a voice, "a treat for your feet. Made from all natural ingredients, it neutralizes odor-causing fungi and bacteria, plus you'll like the tingle." Everyone at the party clapped their hands. "He wasn't lying," said the woman who sat next to Clyde. "I couldn't even be in the same room with his socks." The other people at the party laughed. The woman continued, "I'm not joking. It was so bad." "You've made your point," said Clyde, covering her mouth with his hand. He looked back at Stanley. "Will you do me a favor, Stanley?" Stanley raised and lowered his left shoulder. "I'm going to get more caviar," said Clyde. "Keep your hand over my wife's mouth." He patted Stanley on the shoulder as he rose from the couch. Stanley looked uncertainly at his hand, then at Clyde Livingston's wife. She winked at him. He felt himself blush and turned away toward Hector, who was sitting on the floor in front of an overstuffed chair. A woman sitting in the chair behind Hector was absent-mindedly fluffing his hair with his fingers. She wasn't very old, but her skin had a weathered look to it, almost like leather. Her eyes seemed weary, as if she'd seen too many things in her life that she didn't want to see. And when she smiled, her mouth seemed too big for her face. Very softly, she half sang, half hummed a song that her grandmother used to sing to her when she was a little girl. If only, the moon speaks no reply, reflecting the sun and all that's gone by. Be strong, my weary wolf, turn around boldly, fly high, my baby bird, my angel, my only. Ah, Mitchell Mustangs! That was an awesome book. Now let's remember that in the beginning, before we started this book, Mrs. Goodney directed me to an interview with Louis Sachar, the author of Holes. And when asked his purpose for writing Holes, he said he had moved from California to Texas and it was so hot. So his idea came from writing about the Texas heat. So I imagine he was transitioning. He was getting used to living in the heat. I also imagine that Louis Sachar is a masterful writer because he created characters and situations that made me want to read on. I wanted Stanley to evolve and become the best version of himself. I wanted Zero to evolve. I love how even the other boys back at the camp, he brought a conclusion, a resolution to the way they had treated him. In other words, they said they were sorry. Even Derek Dunn, the bully, in his own way, said he was sorry. I love how things came together. Mrs. Clifford talked a lot about each of these things that were happening that were placed so intentionally inside the book. And when we piece them all together, that becomes a theme of justice. She was right. Justice was served. Lots of other themes in this book too. Friendship. Stanley was not going to leave without Zero. So, Mitchell Mustangs, I leave you to think about a big idea that's come to me. This idea of, does life happen to us or do we create our own lives? And I'll leave you with that to think about. I hope you talk about this book with your friends. I hope that you fill in the holes that maybe we didn't discuss on these videos. I also invite you this summer to find a place in your home that you really love to read. So I did this last video again outside because I love to read outside when it's not too hot in this Texas heat. Well, I knew I was forgetting something. It's Thursday. Ms. Rivero, I wonder who figured out her riddle. What can be driven, although it doesn't have wheels, sliced, but stays whole? Ms. Rivero, she let me know. It's a golf ball. Ms. Rivero, you're clever, just like Louis Sachar. I love your riddles. If you liked his cleverness of his writing, that makes me think to look for other books of his. He's written a whole series called Wayside Schools. They're hilarious, they're clever. Different than Holes, but just as clever. So, it's Thursday, it's our very last video. Let's go over and say hi to George. Maybe he'll come here. George! Oh, he's not moving, and you're gonna see why in a minute. He is not moving because look where he sits, boys and girls. Do you see George? George, you want to say goodbye to the boys and girls? Oh. So George, there he is. Good dog. Good dog. All right. Mitchell Mustangs, thank you. Thank you for doing a tremendous job in this online classroom platform. Thank you for watching all of these videos. All of your language arts teachers, we have missed seeing you face to face, but we're so proud of you for making the best of this situation, for just navigating it. It is what it is, and so we navigated it as well as we could. The last thing I want to say to you, it's a little different because it's the last day. Do stay healthy. Happy reading, happy writing. happy summer. And to all our sixth graders, you're going to be awesome, awesome McCullough Highlanders. So we all look forward to seeing you around town, and we wish you a happy, happy summer.